Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape and Beer, with support from the North Face. Never stop exploring. Dr. Squatch, get dirty, stay clean. Chorus, explore perfection. An Element, restoring health through hydration.
Alex, in the past, you've joked about the best climber in the world syndrome. Is that how you get introduced at your speaking engagements?
Not always, but it is an embarrassingly common moniker. I don't know. I mean, I think for anybody that doesn't know anything about rock climbing, they're like, he's the guy from the movie. He must be the best in the world. And you're like, oh, that's so embarrassing, because that's just not the case at all.
Yeah. Today, we are going to spend some time chatting with arguably the best climber in the world, Adam Ondra.
Yeah, he actually is the best climber in the world.
Yeah, is it even, could you even make an argument that he's not?
Well, I think in today's world of climbing specialization, you could maybe argue that he's not, because he doesn't climb 8,000 meter peaks, or he doesn't, do ski descents of big mountains, and he doesn't really do extreme alpinism. But no, I mean, I think those arguments would be silly, because I think in the world of rock climbing, Adam Ondra is by far the best rock climber in the world.
Yeah.
And I think he's demonstrated it by winning multiple world championships, world cups. Basically he's done well enough in competitions. He's established the hardest routes outdoors. He's established some of the hardest boulders in the world, which normally you would consider a totally separate specialization, and yet he's quite good at that as well. He's also climbed the hardest big walls in the world. He climbed the Dawn Wall in a month. I mean, it took Tommy 7 years. Come on. It's like Adam just showed up and he's like, yeah, that's a good route. Moving on. Go back home to train some more. It's so crazy. I mean, I think it's fair to say that he's by far the best rock climber in the world.
What do you think the biggest takeaway from our conversation with Adam was?
No, I've actually had several takeaways from our conversation with Adam. One of which was his sort of assertion that if he can't do a route in a couple weeks, then he just needs to go home and train more and come back and try it. The fact that he had done silence in something like 60 days, he said, spread over a couple seasons, that he had put up the hardest route in the world in sort of under 2 months of effort, interspersed by hard training. And of course, he was already the best climber in the world. So that's not downplaying the effort that he put into it. But relative to the amount of effort that I've put into some sport projects around my home, it made me realize that really I'm just approaching these projects with too low a level to begin with, and hoping that I'll get better on the route. And the reality is that I'm just not getting better on the route, and I should just, focus on things that I can do to some extent.
Or go back and train more.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when I'm climbing outside, focus on the things that I can do, and then otherwise just train hard.
And what was your other takeaway?
I just thought it was interesting that Adam Ondra didn't seem that stressed about not qualifying for the Paris Olympics, even though he's set a goal to win the Olympics, basically. But his thought was that if he can't even qualify, then he has no chance of being on the podium anyway. So he doesn't really want to qualify if he doesn't have a shot of winning. I was like, that's so interesting. It's just such the heart of a winner. It's like the spirit of a champion in a way that I just don't think I have that. I'd be like, oh my God, I qualified for the Olympics. Even if I get last, at least I'm like on the global stage. That's so cool. And Adam Ondra's like, I don't want to get last. I want to win.
Yeah, Adam Ondra does not believe in participation trophies.
Yeah, that is for sure. Yeah, no, I suppose he must have thrown away all his trophies over the years, because he would have way too many. So he's just anything for participation, anything that's not first or second place, he's just thrown in the trash, I bet.
Totally. Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitzko Hall.
This is Climbing Gold. Where are you, Adam?
So we are for a couple of weeks with the whole family in Trondheim, which is the town 2.5 hours away from Flatanger.
Oh, cool.
And so I think of it as a training camp. The Trondheim has a really cool climbing gym. So when the weather is good, we do like a day trip to Flatanger and try BIG. So right now I'm on a parking spot of the climbing gym here.
Classic. That's about as dirtbag as it gets. You're just keeping it real. You're in the parking lot at the climbing gym.
You just have to make it efficient, no? Especially since having a kid, you have to be even more efficient.
Totally. Actually, and now I'm personally more curious about what it means to climb with a small child and like how you balance all the family stuff.
I mean, it's a lot about time management. So being at the crag with the child, that's tough. And I don't really do it that often. It's more like I take my time, I go rock climbing, and if we go as a family, it's mostly me supporting my wife and she's climbing.
Mm-hmm. I know it's hard though. Do you find yourself? I find my days at the crag are much shorter. You just show up, you go faster. There's like less time between. It's like it's all just tighter. Try to make it home faster.
I think like having family, some things definitely change, but the good things kind of definitely remained. The life is so much more interesting, and there's a new life that kind of entertains you. But at the same time, it's just about the time management. It's not always easy, but it's definitely possible. I think now after the Olympics, we'll be kind of free to kind of travel around before Hugo goes to school. So I think we will have 3 years when we can travel around and we don't really have to be fixed to one place. That's something we have never done as a family. And I don't think I will be competing anymore. So I think it's a good opportunity in our life to take advantage of that. And then I think when Hugo starts the school, I think we will be more fixed to one place, probably our hometown Brno in Czechia.
It's funny you say that though, because you've been traveling literally your whole life, no?
Yeah. But I've never really lived somewhere for months, I'm more used to doing like a shorter trips, maybe the maximum 3, maybe 4 weeks down in Spain during the winter time. But that's usually it. And also it's mostly because I really like to climb in mostly different places. And like if you climb in one place for a really long time, I kind of get bored.
Mm-hmm. But man, just from reading the news, it feels like you're in a different crag every week. It's like, oh, and then you show up here and do all these routes, then you show up there and do all these routes. And I feel like it's been that way for, I don't know, 15 years or more. So you've been basically, I swear you've been to every single crag in Europe. I mean, it's crazy.
No, like Europe has definitely a ton of crags, and they're
I know.
new, and especially France and Spain. There are so many that I've never been to. But yes, probably when I was at the high school, it was exactly like that. Every weekend we were climbing somewhere else.
How do you maintain the psyche for that? After, I mean, you've literally been your entire life since you were a small child going to a new crag and trying the hardest route basically every day that you can for what, 20 something years? I mean, I guess you've been climbing for 30 years almost.
I think I've been climbing for 25 years, like at least 4 days a week.
Yeah, that's so crazy. I mean, I say the same thing actually, because I think I've been climbing 28 years. And I say, 4 or 5 days a week, basically for 28 years. It's like totally. I mean, you don't feel, you don't get tired
for like rock climbing at the new crag, and like just sampling some really cool routes on site. That's something I will never get bored of. I mean, for hardcore training, that's sometimes a bit more difficult to find the motivation when like, ooh, there is another nice alternative, going out at the crag and enjoy a bit of time in the air. And that sometimes perspective of just like training 6 hours in the gym on system board and like running jumps on the modern bouldering is kind of like, is it worth it? But then yes, I am ambitious, and from time to time it's kind of good to really focus and train hard, and then you kind of appreciate the days out even more. But let's say the regular sport climbing day at the crag, especially if it's a crag where I have never been, is something that I'm pretty sure I will never get bored of. And Europe, it will always have enough new crags to me, and I don't feel like I even have to travel that far.
Yeah, that's the beauty of living in Europe. I mean, it is so different than living in the US, because here it's like you just don't have that many crags to visit all the time.
Yeah, but we don't have so much
crags, but
we don't have so much trad, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like
yeah,
it's enough to do like one trip a year for some trad climbing and spend the rest of the time sport climbing.
Like you honestly, you feel fulfilled just sport climbing all the time forever?
No, for sure not. I definitely like the adventurous side. I think it has something to do with my parents, because they started as the alpinists, or that's basically what they kind of had to do. So imagine that they would start climbing in the Czechoslovakia that was still under the communism regime in like 1980. They were like 16. back then it was almost impossible to get any gear. So the first harness that my dad would be climbing, he would sew himself.
Yeah.
He would sew his first, I don't know, down chicken and stuff like this. And then he would go to High Tatras, which is like on the eastern side of Czechoslovakia. There are like small mountains, but in the winter they are quite tough.
Mm-hmm.
So if they did some hard climbs, you would make it to the team, and then you would have a chance to go for the expedition into the higher mountains, or climbing like in Verdun on sport climbing. So that's what they did. And you remember myself growing up and driving to the crags, and my parents like telling me all these crazy stories climbing in the mountains. And like somehow I think it really stuck with me that, oh, climbing is about this as well. Oh, this is adventurous. And also, you know, living in Czechia, we have this sandstone climbing, which is definitely quite adventurous. And I got to know this pretty early on as well. So I think I definitely got to enjoy the big runouts on the Czech sandstone in between the rings. So I think that's the reason why, for example, I even had the idea of going to Yosemite, for example, because this adventurous side was always there with me.
Yeah, I was going to ask, actually, could you tell the story of climbing the nose with your dad? Because when I think of you adventuring in Yosemite, I think of you and your dad on the nose. It's kind of amazing. What happened?
So for my dad, it was always a dream to go to Yosemite, but during the 80s in the communism regime, it was basically impossible for him to get there. So, and then in the 90s, he already had the family and kind of shifted from more like Alpine climbing, and he was mostly just sport climbing around the home. So then when I finally made it for the first time in the valley, I went with my dad for the first couple of days. So it was obviously pretty logical that we go for the most obvious objective, which was the nose. So we did it in 24 hours. He was mostly just following after me, but it was a big day out. And then we summited. I couldn't free climb the changing corners and the great roof, but I on-sited the rest of the pitches. But then we were on the midnight on the summit. It started raining, and we couldn't find our way down to find the east ledges. And we thought we were at the right spot, but we were told that there were fixed ropes. There were none. Like my dad, in like torrential rainfall, like 2:00 in the morning, he rapped down like 60 meters. He couldn't find any more anchor. So he would go up, and we just shivered our asses until the sun appeared, and we would kind of orientate ourselves. I mean, I was really surprised how difficult it is to find the way down the east ledges. I think if this was in Europe, considering like how much traffic there is to go down from El Cap, I would think there would be like signs and cairns everywhere, and it's kill.
It's funny you say that though, because if you came back now, there are much bigger cairns.
Okay.
And now there's a little bit more of a designated path, and there's some bigger cairns, and it.
Okay.
You know, but it does change every year though, because with the snow, a lot of that stuff gets wiped out. But anyway, and so that was the same season that you freed the Dawn Wall, right?
Yes, that was the first couple of days in the valley, and then my father left, and I started climbing on the Dawn Wall.
I know. I just think that's so classic, because you guys basically had the quintessential Yosemite experience. Because I mean, literally everybody who climbs in Yosemite has had that experience where they climb the route, but they get way overextended. They're really tired. It's dark. They can't find the descent, and then they have an epic on the way down. And it's like it's just heartening that even the best climber in the world has the exact same experience in Yosemite. It's so funny.
I mean, it was probably the most alpine experience I've ever got so far, and it was kind of funny, you know, hearing all the stories of my parents like getting very similar things like when they were young while we were driving to the crag, and finally, wow, we are experiencing it together with my dad, and he looked so chill, and like I was so cold. I definitely have never been so cold in my entire life.
That's all the Eastern European stereotypes right there. Just like open bivying in the rain, just not even complaining about the cold. Your dad's just this is like a normal day. Just love this, you know. you're like healthy. Yeah, I suppose it's experiences like that keep sport climbing feeling fun. I feel the same way with alpine climbing, that if I do one expedition a year to sort of a remote alpine area, then it makes sort of normal rock climbing feel fun and adventurous for the rest of the year. And I feel like for you, doing one big wall experience, one thing like that, kind of keeps training and keeps sport climbing feeling fun.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of alpine climbing, I think one day I would like to experience it a bit more, but Yeah, one expedition a year will definitely be more than enough. But I feel like I definitely still kind of gain much more experience in big walling and tread climbing.
We'll be back with more after the break. I've been a North Face athlete for almost 18 years, which has been incredible, and I've always appreciated their commitment to exploration. Summit Series is the name of the pinnacle North Face products that I use on every expedition, and I love that their tagline is athlete tested and expedition proven. I've personally tested these products all over the world, and they've always proven themselves. Future Fleece is the next generation base layer that I wear almost every day of climbing outside, whether on the wall or at the crag. You can shop the full Summit Series collection at thenorthface.com. Dr. Squatch crafts natural, high-performance personal care products with no harmful ingredients. I don't shower often, but when I do, I use Dr. Squatch. I especially like the Summer Citrus Bar Soap. From soap to shampoo to conditioner, they help me look, feel, and smell my best for whatever adventure I go on. They're offering listeners 20% off any purchase for new customers with the code ClimbingGold, or you can go to drsquatch.com/Honnold. The link's in the show notes. Dr. Squatch. Get dirty, stay clean. Are you interested in going and climbing things like Trango or climbing in Patagonia or things like that?
I think I'll wait a few more years, but definitely yes.
Well, yeah, basically, I guess my question is, are you interested in it like, if you didn't have competitive ambitions and like, elite performance ambitions, because obviously an expedition like that is a huge hit to training and to, like basically you can't aspire to the Olympics if you're also going on expeditions. Yeah. But if you didn't have those kinds of ambitions, would you go and do, fun trips to the mountains like that?
I think if there wasn't the Olympics, I would not be competing anymore, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Olympics is the only reason why I still feel kind of like I should stick still to the competitions, because that's a unique dream that I still don't have. I think if I wasn't competing, I would be doing much more big walling, or maybe like opening some bigger walls in the Alps, like in run-out bolted style, because that's what you kind of do in the Alps. I don't think I would be doing so much more like Alpine stuff. I think that there's still kind of time for me to do that. I still feel like there is a room for improvement in sport climbing and bringing this into like bigger walls, but not necessarily Alpine climbing.
Yeah, where does you say that there's room for improvement in sport climbing? Where does that motivation come from? Like, do you feel an obligation to perform at a high level because you can, or do you feel like it's an opportunity to sort of prove yourself? Or, basically, as somebody who's already established, the hardest grade in the world more than once, and has basically climbed the hardest routes of every discipline, where does the motivation come from to continue to push sport climbing?
So I think to continue doing competitions, I almost feel like it could be an obligation. To answer the question why I actually want to do it, I say, like, honestly, I don't know. I definitely feel that there is a bit of pressure, maybe like expectation from the others. It's really hard to tell. But for the sake of like pushing my limits in sport climbing, it's just there. I don't know. I definitely have a few routes in my mind that I know that I want to do. I bolted them many years ago, and I want to finish them off. And no matter how long it will take, one day I will send them.
Are any of those routes that we know, or can you talk about any of those?
So right now I'm in Norway, and I'm trying BIG that has been first ascended by Jakob Schubert last year. That's the line that, even though Jakob has already ascended, it doesn't decrease the motivation for me to send it as well, because that's something that I found, I bolted, and it's just too incredible not to send that route. And you kind of experience that climbing this final part of the cave, which is probably the most scenic place in the cave itself, and just enjoying those final jugs to clip the anchor. I just really want to experience that, coming there from the ground on the red point.
So speaking of Project Big, I think it's sort of interesting that historically sport climbing seemed slightly more competitive, in that people didn't really talk about projects, or they'd hide them. Or, in the US, at least, there's stories of people like pouring oil over other people's projects and things to like keep them from sending their projects. And then to think that you basically gave, one of the hardest routes in the world to Jakob to so that he could send it. And then he live streamed it on YouTube. It's all sort of crazy. I mean, I watched the video. It's total incredible spectacle. It seems like elite sport climbing nowadays feels slightly more collaborative in that you guys are working together to create the hardest climbs in the world. Can you talk at all about that? I mean, why open your project up? Why share in that way?
So I think if you are on a similar level with your peers, then it's actually very reasonable, because if you're working on a route alone, it's very likely that you will not end up using the best possible beta. And usually the downgrade happens because somebody finds a different beta. So if you work on a project with somebody else, you're much more likely to find the best beta and also to give it the right grade. And I think it also has something to do with the competitive scene, as most of the climbers are, or at least were, competitors. And I think the scene on the competitions is really good, is that we are all naturally competitive, but it's this healthy competition. It's not this like ego competition. Okay, we are all able to accept it. Okay, that guy today beat me, but that's okay. He was better. I will train harder. It's not like, you beat me and that's why I hate you. Which is like funny to say it in a way, but in so many times, our brains are actually working like that. But it's kind of important to step back and kind of realize, okay, he just deserved that he won. So I think bringing this healthy competition to the rock is nice. And competitiveness could be negative, but it could be also really positive. It's just like on your character and personality, whether it's healthy for you or not.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've said basically the same thing in the past as well. I mean, especially with speed records and things like that. I mean, healthy competition can bring out the best in everybody, and then everybody performs at a higher level. And ultimately, that's what everybody wants, is to be the best climber they can be.
Yeah.
But I am curious if you have any thoughts as to why the competition scene feels healthy for you right now, because I do feel like in the past, like, I mean, certainly when you look at competitions from the 90s or early 2000s, it just didn't feel like a healthy competition like that. It's like people that like hate each other, and like real rivalries, and it all felt a little bit more petty. Maybe, I mean, it's hard to say because I wasn't as in touch with the scene then. But do you think that there have been any real changes in the competition scene?
So I know all of this also based on the stories and books, but I definitely believe that the climbing is very different. But I would say that times have changed as well. I think the 80s, 90s were like the times of a big ego, and it's a bit different. Maybe we are still living in the times of a big ego, but the ego somehow shifted into more like social media and exposing yourself on the social media.
I actually wonder if part of that is just that there's more money in climbing now, and sort of counterintuitively, because you would think that more money in it could make it more competitive. On the other hand, though, it also means that competitors can all make a living and everybody can support themselves and support their family, and it's like it's maybe a little bit more comfortable. And so I wonder if part of the reason that competition is healthier now is just because everybody, at the end of the day, everyone's like leading a pretty good life and pretty happy and like is basically okay. Whereas I feel like in the past there were a lot of people who were really struggling.
So I think like even 20 years ago, which are the times that I almost remember, or I have some information from the first hand, there was much more pressure on some of the competitors from some countries. They really had to perform on the competitions if they wanted to make a living. That because of a pretty good support from the government in most of the European countries. Maybe like US and Canada is slightly different, but when you are a really good competitor on a high level, you get some sort of support from the government, and it's not like you save money for the future, but like you have enough money to like do your stuff. So that I think changed for the competition scene. I'm not sure if there is much more money for the outdoor climbing. It's really hard to tell. There are like different ways how to make money because of the social media, YouTube and stuff. Sometimes that doesn't really depend on how hard you climb, but it's a little bit different nowadays.
Nowadays we can all just look to Magnus for inspiration. It's like why train so hard when you could just have a YouTube channel? But I suppose you're about halfway there, huh? I mean, you're doing because your YouTube channel.
In a way,
I actually don't know the numbers with subscribers and things, but I feel like you also have a very popular YouTube channel and also create a lot of content. And so, actually, I am kind of curious. I mean, you're one of the most successful professional climbers in the world. I mean, regardless of your actual climbing achievements, which, are obviously you're the best climber in the world, but in terms of professionalism, you have the team, you have the agent, like you have all the people around you that help support your climbing. You have the YouTube channel, the whole, you're creating content, you're collaborating with other popular YouTubers, like you're doing all the things that a modern professional basically has to. I'm curious how do you feel about that level of professionalism nowadays? It's like, I mean, because just looking at your career over the last 20 years, I mean, you went from road tripping with your parents, just like sleeping in the dirt next to your van and like sport climbing all the time, to now, supporting a family, a wife and a child, and having a team and like handlers and like people who help facilitate the whole thing.
Yeah.
But obviously that's all in service of being able to climb as much as possible at the highest level that you possibly can.
Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about that. I mean, it is a real change in climbing over the last.
I mean, in a way, I don't really feel that so much has changed.
Yeah, because you're just climbing your best all the time.
And in a way, I can still be the same dirtbag that I was if I want to, and there are still a lot of days that I just take my van and just stay in the van for a weekend, and I don't have any camera guy, and I just do my stuff with one friend and enjoy climbing to the fullest. I have the whole team that kind of makes it all possible, that I really focus on climbing and I don't really have so much work around. And I think I've managed to find a good balance around that. But I'm wondering myself as well, like, is it something that I want to do? Is it something that makes me happy? Is it something that produces like a good service to the climbing community? Most of the time I say yes, and that's why I keep doing it. But at the same time, I'm in a very unique position that to say no, just go back to where I was, and yeah, I would still make a comfortable living, just getting some sponsors and not really working for them at all. Most of the climbers still need to do that. I'm in a position that if I say no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I wonder if having a family changes your calculus for that kind of thing at all. Because I know that for me personally, it kind of has like I care so much less about social media and things like that, and like creating content. Because I'm kind of like, oh, I'd rather be at home with the fam and like focus on what I can sort of consider real life. I mean, do you notice that at all?
Yes, absolutely. I want to work less. Let's say if you think of it, everything else besides climbing itself is work. Even though it's part of like professional climbing career, climbing itself is something that you want to do, and everything else is like something extra. And if you want to balance the time with the family, or just more and more realizing, okay, I just want to have the free time. And since also our son Hugo is little, and once pretty soon he will grow up, and those are the times you don't want to miss. So I definitely think about that a lot.
Actually, so how far out do you normally set goals for yourself, or training goals? I mean, right now, the last, I guess, 6 or 7 years you've been focused on the Olympics. That's crazy to think it's been so many years.
I mean, it's just recently I was thinking about it, that the Olympics is kind of like, it's cool that Olympics finally made it to the Olympics, but if it didn't, it would make my life so much easier.
Well, I think the real issue is that climbing came to the Olympics just a few years too late for you.
Yes.
Because if climbing had been in the Olympics 10 years ago, you'd be so psyched and it would be perfect.
Yeah.
But right now you're kind of like, oh man, especially because I forget which it was one of the World Cups this season, right? Where it was you, Alex Megos, and Jakob Schubert on the podium, and then everybody else in the top 8 was like 19 years old. It was like,
or 16.
Yeah, exactly. It's so crazy. It's like, yeah, it does feel like that the competition scene is steadily turning over. It's like there's a new generation.
I think it's cool that, there are 16-year-olds and there are 30-year-olds, and we can still compete with each other. But I think definitely last season, there were some incredibly young talents that it's going to be hard to keep up with them in the next years, especially in lead climbing. It's kind of understandable that in bouldering, the style has changed so much, and I'm not maybe the most dynamic person in the world. So it's pretty obvious for me that keeping up with the young generation that has grown up in the modern gym, it's going to be impossible. But in lead climbing, I think it's going to be for a lot. It seemed that for a long time, that maybe the modern approach, doing maybe less things for the fun and spend a lot of time doing like the jumpy boulder problems and maybe doing like less hard work, doing circuits on a small spray wall, kind of leads to the fact that the lead climbing on the competition has maybe not been developing so much, that the level has kind of been stagnating. But the last year, the level has gone up so much. I had the feeling.
Oh yeah, you think that the lead World Cup this year was much harder, or the standard is rising?
Yeah, I think the standard has risen a lot last year, and then during the last 10 years, it was kind of pretty similar. So I think I entered the World Cup stage in 2009. I think until 2012, I think the level has gone up quite a lot, and then it was kind of stagnating all the way until Tokyo. And since then it has gone up quite a lot.
When you say the level, is that the level? I mean, really, what you're talking about is the level of the other competitors, no?
So it was constantly getting harder and harder to make it to the semis. That's for sure. But then to be on the podium, it was kind of the same, because then in lead climbing, you're basically competing with the best 6 or 8. You know, you don't really care so much unless you make a stupid mistake in the qualifiers.
Or what was I saw the one, was it World Cup or World Championship this year with the toilet bowl holds, like the clear plastic holds that were like had no texture, and people are like trying to wet their hands and they're trying to dry their hands and they're trying to chalk, they're trying to not chalk. I was like, this is diabolical. It looked evil. So you can't even see the holes. I was like, what is that? You know, people are trying to do like a three-way paddle dyno on like holds that are made of glass. I was like, this is totally insane.
I don't think it's a future though, because people will end up spitting on their hands and people will think like, this is horrible, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Unhygienic.
Totally. Or a massive COVID outbreak amongst competitors when everybody's licking their hands frantically trying to do the same problem. It's like, I don't know.
Especially if it's in the middle of the lead of the lead route, no?
Totally.
Because you are not carrying like a bottle of water on your harness or something like that.
Well, you start I don't know. I have friends with really dry skin. Actually, Jonathan Segrist. I mean, you know, Jonathan, he has like really dry skin, and he'll often climb. He'll like just spray water into his chalk bag so that when he chalks up, his hands get moist too.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's so crazy. But that would be the when you look up at the lead final and it's all made of completely clear plastic, and you're like, oh no, and then you start just pouring water into your chalk bag. Like, I don't know. But how frustrating is that if, you know, and I mean, I guess I'm asking this to you, but really generally for any competitor, if someone has been training for, you know, years or months and they feel like they're the best in the world, you know, the strongest boulder in the world in this moment, and then they get to the competition and all the holds are made of clear plastic and they don't even understand like how the problem works, you know, it's like, I don't know. I mean, isn't it frustrating competing when so much of it feels random?
So for me, not so much, because I always felt like bouldering is something random and I don't really care so much about that. So even though I won some of the competitions, it never really gave me so much satisfaction, because at the back of my mind, I always knew like, okay, I won, but it was just so random. Whereas like winning a World Cup in lead is like, that's a big thing. That really showed that you were climbing really well. It wasn't random. Like you can't win a World Cup in lead by random luck. Whereas in bouldering, it can happen.
That's interesting. But then how do you explain somebody like Janja, who wins every bouldering World Cup for, I don't know, you know, like 20 World Cups in a row or something, like just such dominance, you know, because obviously it does feel kind of random, but then in the women's field, you're kind of like, well, it's not totally random because one person is just dominating.
Because Janja is just in her own league in the women category, whereas like in the men's, nobody is like way better than the others. Like we are all pretty similar, and then it really comes down to the style which they set. And sometimes, you know, even though we have 4 boulder problems in the finals, sometimes it's just like one boulder problem that really decides. You know, it doesn't really change if like person A just crushes this physical boulder and another person just barely does it but still does it. You know, it doesn't really change a thing. So if both gets that top, and then there is another slabby boulder that person B does and person A doesn't do, so it's just the number of tops and attempts per those tops.
I think that would drive me crazy. I would just hate to put so much effort into something that isn't really decided by you. And I think that would be particularly true.
Yeah.
If you're at least sort of average size or maybe taller than average for the competitive field. But if you were really short, like I think it would drive me crazy if you're just feeling so strong and then you get there and you just like can't reach the start holds or something. You'd be like, oh, that's so frustrating.
I think in the men's category, it doesn't really happen. I think some of the short climbers,
when you're a 16-year-old Japanese boy, and you're trying to dyno like twice your body length, that's crazy.
They are so dynamic, they don't care. and like if you look at the statistics, it's just good to be short. If you're a man, it's good to be 170. I'm 186 in centimeters, and I'm by far the tallest. Maybe not among the boulders, but in the lead climbers for sure. You definitely gain much more advantage by being tall. Whereas like on the competitions, it's really rare to gain advantage by the height. Maybe in some sort of slabs, but but in lead climbing, I don't really think so.
We'll be back with more after the break. I first found Coros when I was looking for a GPS watch that could track my biggest outdoor adventures. I needed something with a massive battery life that was also robust enough to handle the climbing. As it turns out, Coros is the only GPS watch brand that has done some serious development for climbers, from multi-pitch GPS tracking to indoor programmed workouts. The watches have a mind-blowing battery life. The Vertex watch series lasts for more than 100 hours in GPS activities, so I only need to charge it once every several weeks. I only need to charge my watch so sporadically that I can never find the charger because I haven't used it in 6 weeks. If you're interested in bringing new technology into your climbing training and tracking, you should consider their new Vertex 2S. Go to Coros.com and use the code ClimbingGold to secure a free watch carabiner with the purchase of your new Vertex 2S. The link's in the show notes. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix formulated with a science-backed ratio of sodium to potassium to magnesium. Each packet delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes, free of sugar, artificial colors, or other dodgy ingredients. It tastes great, and I've used it extensively on expeditions. Element is formulated for anyone looking to restore health through hydration, and is perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, or those following keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets. Try Element totally risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll refund your order, no questions asked. So whether you're new or returning Element customer, you can get a free Element sample pack with any drink mix order when you go to drinkelement.com/climbinggold. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. The link's in the show notes. Yeah, so you talk about this level of non-attachment that you have to the results of the bouldering competitions and sort of competitions in general. Is that something that you've had to learn over your competitive career, or is that something that you got from your parents? Or
well, that's something I'm constantly learning. I think since I was a little kid, I was struggling with the frustration a lot. That's
something that you have to relearn every time you don't make semis. You're like, God damn it. Yeah. Or like every time you don't make finals, you have to relearn. It's a lesson in non-attachment.
I think the reason why I don't care so much about the bouldering comps, because I do care about the league comps even much, much more.
Yeah. So does that mean you practice a ton of attachment?
Yeah, that's where I get so much more frustrated if it doesn't work out the way I want to.
And how does that compare to how you feel on rock?
It's pretty similar. So when I have a project that I really care about a lot on the rock, I think the level of pressure is the same, or it's even worse on the rock.
When you say the pressure, though, where does the pressure come from? I mean, it's just from you.
Yeah, it's from you. If you dedicate your time training months for training specifically for some certain rock climbing project, you really want to do it.
Yeah, I guess you want to see the results of all your effort.
Yeah, and it's not only like you want to be proud that you achieved something good, but it's also really amazing personal experience if you're working on something hard and all the up and downs. And like when I was a little kid, I didn't really enjoy working on the long-term projects. I really enjoyed just climbing on site or in a couple of tries. And I was also always thinking, those guys that are working on a route for like multiple seasons, like what's the point of it? Like even a monkey can learn, certain number of hand moves and foot moves, but it's just much more complicated. And there's lots of pressure, when the shape and the conditions get aligned and you kind of have a feeling in your stomach, today is the day, but you can't fail.
Mm. I'm going to remember that even a monkey can learn enough moves. If I'm like, next time I fail on my project, I'm going to be like, even a monkey could have done that. Like,
I think about it a lot nowadays when I work on a project, having this perception when I was a little kid, how easy it must be working on a long-term project.
And how did that, did that just gradually change for you? Like, how did you go from mostly on-site climbing to but you don't mostly project climb now, right? You still do a lot of on-siting.
Yeah. I think having the balance is really important. And I think in terms of fun, on-siting is just so much better. But then in red pointing or long-term projecting, there is certain personal experience that I find really interesting. And sometimes, to kind of be able to experience more fun while you're on-siting, it's important from time to time to do something which, it's maybe a bit less fun, to kind of appreciate the fun part.
Yeah. Actually, so this is maybe a little bit too niche for Climbing Gold, which is a climbing podcast, but something I've been kind of wondering about, and I don't know if you have an opinion on this kind of thing, but so there, every mainstream climbing news thing like 8a.nu or, Crypt, like basically the different like media things will always report on you going on a family vacation to wherever and on-siting like 8 routes, 8B plus and harder in, 4 days or whatever. It's like, oh, you go to some random cave in Sardinia and you do like 4 routes, 8B plus and 8C.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for the average person, like for me and my friends climbing at home, we see that on the news and we think like, whoa, Adam Ondra is always climbing at his highest level. Like, that's incredible. But then a friend and I were talking about it the other day and we were like, man, you on-siting 8C is like 6 grades below your max, like below your max. And I'm kind of like, if I don't on-site a route that's 6 grades below my max, I'm like slightly disappointed with myself. You're sort of like, oh, that's like, that seems. And so,
yeah.
Or, the exact numbers might be different, but the idea is correct.
Yeah.
And so I think that in some ways, those news stories that are constantly like, oh, Adam Ondra on-sites a bunch of 8Cs or a bunch of 8B pluses, and, which in the US, like, oh, on-siting 514, you're like, that must be elite. But I'm like, is there a certain level at which that just isn't really elite anymore? That's just normal for you. And that's basically just like a family vacation trip where you're like, I'm just climbing a bunch of fun routes and I'm having a good time and I'm hanging draws. Like, actually, I guess I'm just curious, how does it feel for you? Like, does that still feel like elite performance, or is that like vacation with your family and it's all fun?
It really depends on the climbing style. So if it's like a modern climbing in the cave with stalactites and everything is chalked, on-siting 8AB plus is more or less like, oh, if you fall off, then something is wrong. I know that. Yeah, it's really embarrassing. I feel like I don't have to be in a shape to on-site 8B plus if it's like the style which is good for climbing on-site.
Yeah, it's obviously different if it's like covered in spider webs and there are no quick draws and you're like, where are the holds? Yeah, that's a different experience.
I think especially, on-siting has become kind of out of fashion. And I think if you think about like more old school routes, hanging the draws, slight row hanging face climbing with no chalk, the level has been kind of the same for the last 30 years. People can on-site 8A plus.
Yeah, but
and especially if you take some of the 9B climbers nowadays on the route like this, most likely they will fail.
Yeah, that's true. But you've always been particularly good at that kind of thing. There are stories of you like on-siting some random 8B plus on the side of the crag with no draws and no chalk and like covered in dirt, and you're just like, oh geez. Like, I have multiple friends who has physically seen you on-site like some disgusting 8B, or like, oh, that route that's like way over on the side that nobody ever does, and then you just on-site it and you're like, oh god.
I enjoy that so much.
Yeah.
But I'm one of the very few like elite sport climbers that have actually done a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially nowadays, nobody really ever does that. So I think I'm the only one that has the experience. And I think you need to gain quite a lot of experience to be able to read like different kind of rock and kind of that you don't just spend 1 minute looking around and trying to figure it out. It's like, it's not like I'm saying I always get it right, but most likely I will get it right, even though there is no chalk, especially if it's like a route which is slightly below my max level.
It's funny. I really enjoy that kind of thing too, and I also often do the weird routes over on the side that have no chalk,
Yeah.
but I just do it at a much lower level, because my max level is so much lower than yours, and then my onsite level is also much lower.
Yeah, but I definitely believe that your capability of on-siting such a route is relatively close to your max level compared to many other climbers.
Yeah,
because we have both done it so much in our lives.
Mm. Yeah, and I agree, the diversity of styles. I mean, I sort of feel like any style, like a wide crack to a slab to an overhanging thing to like stalactites. I mean, like I just love all the styles.
Yeah.
And we'll try any of them. And it's like it's all so fun.
Yeah.
But so talking about all this diversity of climbing, I mean, I guess in a way you've sort of limited yourself to performance rock climbing, like doing things that are really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But within that, what are you most proud of? Like, what are the things that stand out to you? I mean, you've done the hardest grades, you've done some of the hardest boulders in the world, you've won, world championships and world cups. And
because I dedicated the most energy into sport climbing, it's my hardest sport climb, which is silence. I am proud that I am capable of climbing hard routes in any style and on tread, bouldering. But if I should pick up just one, for sure, it is sport climbing, even more than competitions. For me, first ascending silence is way more than world championship title, for sure.
And so how much effort did you actually put into that? I mean, I've watched the film, obviously, but it doesn't give a total sense of seasons and days. And
2 seasons, maybe 60 days in total.
And how much sort of training in between? Because like when you say 2 seasons, does that mean that the year in between was dedicated to training hard for that route? Or it's tough because you're training for competition all the time anyway.
Yeah. It's hard to distinguish whether like during that 1 month training block, I was like training specifically for silence or like training in general.
Yeah, for the Lead World Cup.
Let's say I had that route in my mind for maybe, let's say, 16 months. So during maybe from May till September, I was mostly doing my training towards silence. So I was either in the cave or I was at home training specifically for silence. And maybe during the training blocks, I was making like short trips somewhere else.
So when you say 2 seasons in 60 days, I mean, that's not really that much in the grand scheme of projecting. Like, what do you think is possible if you were to apply 2 years to one route?
It wouldn't be much of a difference. I am a climber who learns to move really quickly. So in silence, after 2 weeks, maybe in silence, it took a little bit longer because getting the beta was so difficult. And it was such a
fucking weird
route.
Beta. Yeah. So
yeah. But once I had the beta, I knew like, okay, it's possible. And I was kind of close. It still took maybe, I don't know, more 45 days of work. But I kind of knew, okay, I need to get the right window of the perfect shape and the perfect weather window. But I think if people end up doing their project after 5 years of projecting, mostly it meant like for the first couple of years, they had no chance. And then they would actually end up sending it faster if they would train and climb on something else.
Yeah, it's funny. That's I feel like a knife in my heart. I've been trying this 9A near my home for a while, and like at a couple different years I've tried it, haven't quite done it. And then this year I was kind of trying it, but then my wife was really pregnant. We had another baby, got kind of sick, basically just like haven't really done it. And I think in deep in my heart, I kind of know that I just don't think I quite have the level for the specific route. But you're kind of like, yeah, you're probably right. But so since we've had the second baby, I haven't had the time to go outside for that anyway.
Yeah.
And so I've just been training in the gym and actually really enjoying. We built a little home gym and I've been training in the home gym and it's great. And I'm really enjoying that. And I'm sort of like, well, I guess if this is all I'm able to do, I may as well just enjoy what I'm doing right now. Yeah. But I know it does hurt a little bit. I mean, we've all seen our friend at the crag where you see your friend climbing and you're like, there's just no chance you're going to do that route, even though you just keep trying it like season after season. And you're like, why don't you just come back when you're a little bit better? And I'm like, but that's a hard thing to know though, because if you're like one hanging a route and you feel like it's right there, you're like, oh, it's close. But it's always hard to know, like, is it actually close or is it, is it never
because like
come?
if you think of, for example, 9C, it could be, if you one hang a 9C, it could actually mean that you do 2 9As in a row with a good rest in between, and 2 9As in a row with good rest in between. That's nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would still be a lot to me, but I know what you mean.
Yeah,
That's a lot easier
That,
than
that,
9C.
but that's
Yeah.
like to put it into the context. That's million miles away from sending the 9C.
Yeah. So, do you think there are natural limits to what's possible?
No, we are far away from that.
Yeah. Okay. How far do you think though?
I think saying like whether 10A or 10B or 10C is a human limit, it's very difficult to tell because 10A or 10B or 10C is something so abstract. It's not like exact time on like running a marathon or something like that, or a 100-meter sprint. We just don't know how 10A or 10B will look like. We just don't know how much of a. I believe that grading scale is linear, so there is the same difference between 9A and 9A plus, and the same difference 9C and 9C plus. It's just subjectively much more difficult to progress the higher you go in the grading scale.
Yeah, because the closer you get to your limits, the harder it is to get past it.
It could happen in the future, that the gaps in between the grades will be smaller, and then we might even have 11A. But I don't know. I'm pretty sure in 20 years we will have some 10As.
So circling back to the Olympics for just a few last questions, you said that this year will probably be your last year of competition, just because it's just for the Olympics.
I can't tell. Maybe for the LA, since maybe there is a lead as a single discipline, I'll be still motivated. But I think it really depends on what happens this season. I leave it all open. I definitely think of it that I definitely don't want to lose 4 more years of my climbing career just for the sake of the competitions. And then after LA, finding out, I'm just too old to send my projects.
Totally.
That I would want to climb.
What would you miss about competitions when you finally walk away?
I don't think I will miss them. It's cool, but it's cool.
So
when
why keep doing them?
I enjoy the training.
But you could do the same training without the competitions.
Exactly, but it's like extra push that motivates you even more, I would say.
Huh.
I don't think I would ever train hard if it wasn't for the competitions. I think in a way, indirectly, competitions made me send even harder routes outdoors.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, competitions. But so what is it about the competition that pushes you to train that hard? I mean, there's obviously like the public performance, the like putting yourself out there, but what specifically? Because I mean, if it's just like the public pressure, you could just live stream every hard attempt, just like Jakob. It's like you could just you could find other ways of.
It's not the same. I think it's the first part of the competitions is all those weeks and months of the training before the competition itself. And then, overcoming the pressure of like making it all work during that one day, which is cool. It's a interesting personal experience, but I think I've done too much of it in my life. And I think the Olympics will be kind of a nice pinnacle of dealing with that. And then I might stick to something which is not necessarily easier when you're projecting on the highest possible level, but it's just different. Yeah. I think the stuff that you're competing in the front of the audience, so many times when I was competing, it was like so cool. And I'm really glad that it's, unforgettable, topping out the final routes in World Championships in 2016 when I took my second title. There was 12,000 people like standing and clapping in ovation. It was just incredible. But then like 1 month later, you're on the top of El Cap and you think like, this is probably better. If I already had an Olympic medal, the pressure would be so much lower. But sometimes I feel like I should at least give it a try to get that medal. And if it doesn't work out, there's always the time to climb on the rock. At the moment, I kind of definitely, after all those years of sacrificing myself for the competitions, it's not easy to find the motivation to keep on training on plastic and especially doing maybe the modern style of bouldering, which at the same time I'm always kind of feeling on the verge of the injury. There are definitely some moves which I don't really like, and which I kind of definitely feel I can't even train because I just don't want to get injured while I'm training. But on the other hand, now it's March, so it's only 5 months more, and then I'm free.
Thank you, Adam, for taking a moment out of your busy training schedule to chat with us. Good luck on the next round of qualifiers. Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape Then Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production and editing team includes the talents of Lauren Delaney-Miller, Marco Seiler-Gonzalez, and Evan Phillips. Skylar Perwins is our YouTube and social media editor. Music today by Brendan O'Connell. Tracks are courtesy of the artists or Track Club. Our creative director is me, Vince Cahal. Our executive producers are Jonathan Retzik and Ben Endy for RXR Sports, and Lisi Hendricks and Becca Call for Duct Tape Then Beer. Thanks for listening.